One of the biggest scandals in the history of America came out. After a long wait, it was officially revealed about Epstein. This is the second thing I was most waiting for after the World Cup, and because of its severity, many people died, but because they talked about it and did not think about it leaking. And now names have come out that I would not have expected in a whole 100 years. Scientists, artists, princes, doctors, presidents, the most famous people on Earth. In this bad list, one of them is the physicist, Stephen Hawking. If he is one of the most famous scientists on Earth, and his body seat does not move, his tongue does not move, and yet he has become one of the greatest scientists on Earth. Every time I see him, I say, glory be to God, glory be to him. He took away his blessings and gave him the gift of reason. He spent his entire life exploring the universe and black holes and formulating theories about us. We discovered that he was exploring other things other than the count. The first swear to God, a big shock. He was one of the biggest customers on Epstein's island. He used to go to the island while walking 160 feet in the right chair. He was on Al Island, but on the island, he had the fitness of Cristiano Ronaldo with Real Madrid. I cannot believe what I heard. Oh God, let us not rush into the matter. Let me tell you slowly.
Before we start, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Your support means a lot to me, and it helps me to keep creating great content for you.
Many of you may not know what Epstein's list is, or who Epstein himself is. Let us explain the matter from scratch. Jeffrey Epstein, the American billionaire from New York, and even though he is a billionaire, no one knows how he built his wealth until now. In the beginning, he was a mathematics teacher at a school called Dalton, New York. One of the most powerful private schools in America. But the problem is that he did not have a degree so that he could study his income through intermediaries. And in this private school, he met the father of one of the students there, a person named Alan Greenberg. Alan was the CEO of Bear Stearns Bank, one of the largest investment companies at that time in America. Jeffrey took advantage of his opportunity and entered a job interview at that bank, and took the job in the first interview, even though he did not know a single thing about banks, nor did he have a degree or anything that reached that place on his tongue. But in the job, he began to learn about banks, investments, and loans, but most importantly of all, he began to form relationships with the richest people in America, and that was the most important thing for him. Because after that, he formed his own company and called it J. Epstein. And after he launched his company, nothing is known about him. He began to hide all his secrets. No one knows who his clients are, and no one knows how he gets his money. No one knows anything about him. But during that period, he got to know the most important person who opened the door to wealth for him, one named Leslie Wexner. Leslie was a major American businessman who owned Victoria's Secret and many other stores, and although he was also a big merchant, he was quite a big fool because after Epstein's employee of his, he decided to hand over all his companies and properties to him, not to take them for himself, but for manage them financially. But you know, Epstein is a fraud from the day he was born. And that's why he started using this thing to his advantage. From the first day, because Victoria's Secret was under Epstein's control, he began to control which models would go on stage and which would not. Then he made a palace in New York, the main place where he chose the models. And here the misfortunes began to unfold. There was a girl named Maria Farmer whom Epstein saw in a museum when he first saw her perform. He offered to become her a receptionist at his palace in New York, and he also offered to help her in her artistic life because she was a painter, and she accepted the need. This would be the worst decision in her life. Maria, as soon as she became an employee, began to notice that there were young schoolgirls coming in and out of the palace. She asked him, "What does the girls do?" Exactly, he told him that these people would become models in the future. So we have been training them ever since. And the woman actually believed what Epstein said because she was being honest. But after a while, she really knew that something was wrong when Epstein turned on her and started harassing her. And here Maria remained silent and told the police to cover up the matter first thing. Because Epstein knew businessmen, politicians, and figures in Congress, and the one accusing him was just one 16-year-old girl who knew how. They said, "Let us shut up." Epstein knew that he had power that was not natural at that time, and he felt that he was above the law. Then he saw a 16-year-old girl named Virginia Roberts and made her the massage director. He has no job on earth called a massage director, but he would invent anything to try to make fun of little girls. His decision to hire Virginia Roberts was the worst decision he had ever made in his life. Epstein began to bring his friends, who were great figures for the girl, one of them named Alan Dershowitz. Likewise, there is a lawyer who works as a professor at Harvard, and his name is not new in the case. His name was linked to the case from the beginning, and yet he continued as a professor at Harvard, even though he admitted that he had a massage at Epstein's palace. The issue has two dimensions, a beginning and an end. It began in Florida in March 2005, when a 14-year-old girl complained to the police that she had spotted Epstein in his mansion in Boom Beach. The police began investigating the matter and put Epstein under surveillance. The police investigated many young girls, and they all confessed that they had been molested. In Epstein's palaces, some of them are in New York, some of them are in Florida, and then he was arrested for the first time in 2006. Someone comes and says, "Okay, where are the nepotism?" You say, "This one knows lots of officials. How was he arrested?" I said he was arrested, but I did not tell you a day, because he didn't spend a single day in prison. In 2006, on the first day of his position as chief of police in Boom Beach, he complained himself. He said that there were major threats preventing Epstein from being imprisoned, and that there were responsible figures who treated Epstein with special treatment. The chief of police used to say the same thing himself, and let the FBI investigate the matter, as I said before. Likewise, the FBI does not have any involvement in these matters, and they take their time in the investigation. It is normal for them to investigate you for years to find something to catch on you. When the police are afraid of someone's influence, they call the FBI, and this is what happened. The FBI investigated all of Epstein's homes and palaces, and from there, we want to see clips of his palace and the young girls going in and out of it. They caught him in 2008 and sentenced him to 18 months in prison, but even the FBI themselves would become corrupt in the case, because they gave him the stupidest sentence I've ever heard in my life. He was always supposed to be sentenced to 18 months in prison. That is, he spends 18 months in prison. Isn't this true? This is true. This should go without saying, especially since he's supposed to be in a federal prison. This means that he must serve 80% of the sentence in prison. It is correct. No, the sentence is correct. He leaves the prison during the day, goes to work, and then returns to prison at night. I am not kidding. Believe me, I'm not kidding. Go read about this topic to know the amount of cover-up and the big hands that were behind the man, to the point that even the FBI became corrupt in this case. And the big hands that were behind him were the same ones that killed him. The important thing is that in 2018, a newspaper called the Miami Herald published a full investigation into Epstein. and his crimes, the cover-up, the big hands behind him, and the investigation began to reach the American public opinion. Most people knew Epstein at that time, and I am one of them. But the newspaper also had an interest because its biggest focus was on someone named Acosta. Acosta at that time was one of Trump advisors in the White House, and the newspaper focused on him because he was one of those who protected Epstein and prevented him from prison. Also because he was an advisor to Trump. This was their main goal and one of the biggest issues. At that time, Acosta decided to resign, but unfortunately for Epstein, all the people started to know about him and talk about his story because of this in a month. July 2019, the FBI arrested 60 on charges of human trafficking. But the difference is that this time the case was much bigger than that anyone could cover it up. I mean, someone who knew very well was involved, and they imprisoned him in the Manhattan Federal Prison. The prison is one of the most protected prisons in the world, to the point where even Al Chapo is imprisoned. The prison has the power of the guards around it and inside it. If an ant enters it, they will see it. We must remember that it was the biggest case in America in 2019. It was a case of public opinion, and all the people were talking about it. This is a big prisoner who has secrets that could kill people. He has secrets for the people who rule the earth, so because they put her in a cell under maximum surveillance. There are all kinds of cameras, and they also put extra guards in the prison, but to protect Epstein. This means that it is impossible for an ant to be able to get close to him. But after only 1 month of his imprisonment, on August 10th, they found Jeffrey Epstein dead in his cell. And the strangest thing was that the cameras were working on all days except on the day of death. The guards were also asleep on the day of his death. But they did not find him until after he died, even though he was under surveillance 24 hours a day in a tightly controlled federal prison. Okay, the American government investigated the matter, and so a few minutes and a quarter of an hour later, she said that he died by suicide by hanging. That's fine, but not a single sane person believed this nonsense. It's literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I remember sitting in 2019 with the people laughing at the tired inflection of the oldest prisoner in America, and the one who has secrets for the ruling figures to Earth is imprisoned in the strongest prison in New York under maximum surveillance 24 hours, 7 days a week, with all kinds of cameras and guards. He dies by suicide by hanging, and the cameras are turned off at the moment. Of course, the one who killed him was a VIP. All the people were saying Hillary Clinton because anyone who made a mistake about her would die in mysterious circumstances. They would immediately show him a case of suicide by hanging. Anyone who investigated her would die in mysterious circumstances, but with this episode we discovered that Hillary Clinton was not the biggest head in this case, and she wasn't the second biggest head or the third biggest head. Literally, there are much more heads of state and politicians than are on the list, and a series of assassinations as far as the eye can see for anyone who is thinking of investigating the matter. One of them is named John McAfee, the founder of the McAfee antivirus program, which most of us have installed on computers. If we have Windows, there is a place in it. His wealth was estimated at more than 100 million McAfees. He was a genius in computers, but he was crazy on the ground. He behaved in the manner of a normal human being, but at the same time he knew things he was not supposed to know. So well that he wrote a tweet and said, "I collected files on corruption in the government, and for the first time I say that the names of certain characters begin with the names of a CIA agent and officials in the Bahamas. If I am imprisoned or disappear, A file containing 31 terabytes of secret information will be released to the public. To confirm his words, he wrote a second tweet in which he said, getting subtle messages from US officials saying, in effect, we're coming for you, McAfee. We're going to kill yourself. I got a tattoo today just in case. If I suicide myself, I didn't. I was whacked. Check my right arm. He wrote a third tweet and said in it, I am fine. I have good food. Everything is fine. Know that if I hang myself the way Epstein means, it is not me who made it. Okay, let us remember that the one who is saying these things is not an ordinary person. John McAfee is one of the most famous millionaires in America and has relationships with many people, big personalities, but with the warnings he wrote and the many words he wrote, and even though he said it was impossible to commit suicide 1,000 times, he found a suicide in the heavy security prison in Spain was carried out in Spain exactly the same way as Epstein, exactly the same way. They said that it was the same hanging. For the second time, not a single person believed that he killed himself, but there is nothing that anyone can do. What should we do to complain, or do we have any right? It is all right for those who are killing people. The big one is that they can kill anyone who feels that he is a threat to them. The whole story has not ended here. On the contrary, it will begin with just an intro.